Welcome to BookBuzz Reviews and Summaries. Welcome, language enthusiasts, to a world where words are not just tools for communication but are the very building blocks of entire universes. Imagine a world where you can shape your own language, a language that reflects the unique thoughts, emotions, and cultures of its speakers. Mark Rosenfelder's Advanced Language Construction is your passport to this creative world, where the rules of grammar, syntax, and phonetics bend to your imagination. Have you ever wondered how Tolkien created the intricate languages of Elvish, or how the linguists behind Star Trek's Klingon invented one of the most complex languages in popular culture? Well, the secret lies in the art and science of language construction, a practice that combines logic with creativity, structure with flair. And if you've ever been curious about what it takes to go beyond the basics of language creation and dive into the advanced techniques, this book is for you. In Advanced Language Construction, Rosenfelder guides you through the deep and rich landscape of conlangs, constructed languages. He goes beyond the elementary steps and teaches you how to design languages that feel as real as the ones we speak every day. This isn't just about inventing random words and rules. It's about creating entire systems of communication that have their own history, culture, and nuance. Whether you're a hobbyist interested in building your own language for a book, a game, or just for fun, or whether you're a professional linguist looking to expand your horizons, Rosenfelder's expertise will elevate your skills to a whole new level. Throughout the book, you'll explore advanced concepts such as complex grammatical structures, sophisticated phonology, and linguistic typology. Rosenfelder breaks down how to design languages with detailed sound systems, complex verb conjugations, nuanced word orders, and much more. But it's not just about the technical aspects. He emphasizes the importance of culture, worldview, and context, showing you how language and thought are intricately linked. After all, language is more than just a system of communication. It's a reflection of the people who speak it. So, what does it take to construct a language that feels as natural as your own? How do you ensure that your language isn't just a jumble of random rules but a coherent, functional system? And perhaps most intriguingly, how can you make your language resonate with the heart and soul of its speakers? Mark Rosenfelder, a leading expert in the field of language construction, answers these questions and more, offering invaluable insights, tips, and strategies that will guide you every step of the way. By the end of this journey, you won't just know how to create a language, you'll understand how to breathe life into it. So, whether you're a seasoned conlang creator looking for new challenges or a beginner eager to take the plunge, this book is your key to mastering the art of advanced language construction. Let's unlock the potential of language together, one word at a time. Part 1. Laying the foundations of a conlang, constructed language. Language construction, also known as conlanging, is more than just the art of creating words. It's about building a whole universe of communication. For enthusiasts, linguists, and storytellers alike, the desire to create a new language can spring from countless inspirations: the need for a fictional world, the love for linguistic puzzles, or the simple curiosity about how language works. In Advanced Language Construction, Mark Rosenfelder dives deep into the creative and logical aspects of language creation, making it a journey that combines the logic of grammar with the art of expression. Part 1 is all about establishing the foundational principles that will guide the creation of a rich, functioning language. The drive to create a new language. Rosenfelder begins Part 1 by exploring why anyone would want to build a language from scratch. He acknowledges that for some, this is simply a creative outlet, while for others it's a profound personal project or even an academic pursuit. Regardless of motivation, language creation is a reflection of the creator's desires, interests, and understanding of human communication. Rosenfelder explains that constructed languages can serve many purposes. 1. Fictional worlds. Whether it's the vast realms of The Lord of the Rings with Elvish or Star Trek's Klingon, fictional worlds often require distinct languages to feel complete. For creators, Building a language adds depth to the culture and history of the world they've crafted. 2. Personal expression. Some create languages to express their own thoughts, feelings, or experiences in ways existing languages cannot capture. In this sense, conlanging becomes a deeply personal act. 3. Exploration of linguistic possibilities. For linguists and language enthusiasts, conlanging is a tool for exploring how languages function. By building a new one, they get to test their understanding of syntax, phonetics, and other linguistic principles in a hands-on way. The core structure of language. After establishing the motivations for creating a language, Rosenfelder shifts to the essential question: what are the core elements that make up any language? At its core, a language must include mechanisms for both sound and meaning. Rosenfelder explains these as two pillars of language construction, elaborating on both in detail. 1. Phonetics and phonology. Sound systems. Every language has a set of sounds that make up its words. Rosenfelder delves into the principles of phonetics, the science of sounds, and phonology, the system of how those sounds function together. He encourages readers to explore the inventory of sounds in the languages they admire or to invent new ones altogether. This section covers consonants, vowels, and even the rare clicks or tones used in certain languages. The beauty of this part of conlanging is that the creator has the freedom to explore unique sound systems as long as they maintain internal consistency within the language. 2. Grammar. Syntax and morphology. A language is more than just a string of sounds. It has a structure that governs how those sounds come together to form meaning. Syntax is the arrangement of words into sentences, while morphology focuses on the way words themselves are constructed and altered, e.g., tense, number, gender. Rosenfelder lays out the importance of these structures by pointing out that the more complex your language's grammar, the more depth and richness it can have. He introduces the concept of word classes, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and word order, and how these basic rules affect the flow of communication. The balance between simplicity and complexity. One of the fundamental challenges of conlanging is finding the right balance between simplicity and complexity. Rosenfelder acknowledges that some conlang creators aim for a language that is highly ergative, a rare grammatical structure, or agglutinative, where complex ideas are expressed by stringing together root words. However, he advises creators to think carefully about how complex they want their language to be, especially if their primary goal is communication or functionality. Simpler languages, like Esperanto, tend to be easier for others to learn and use, while more complex languages can evoke rich cultural and historical depth, much like Latin or Old English. Rosenfelder encourages readers to consider the purpose of the language. Is it a tool for communication? Is it designed to express a particular culture's worldview? Is it a language for a fictional world? He suggests using complexity to deepen meaning rather than for complexity's sake, and making decisions that serve the language's intentions. Establishing a unique worldview through language. One of the most powerful aspects of language creation is how it can reflect the worldview of its speakers. Rosenfelder takes a moment to emphasize that language doesn't just convey information, it shapes how people perceive reality. For example, in some languages, time is viewed as a linear progression, while in others, it's cyclical. In the same vein, some languages express concepts like ownership or space in entirely different ways. Rosenfelder offers exercises for creators to consider how their language reflects a unique worldview. Is it spoken by an alien species, for example, whose concept of time is completely different from our own? How does their language reflect this difference? By considering these cultural elements, creators can imbue their language with deeper meaning and resonance. First steps in building a language. Now that the reader understands the foundation and importance of sound and meaning, Rosenfelder offers concrete steps to start building their language. The focus is on designing the sound system, setting up the basic grammar rules, and deciding on the word classes. 1. Creating a phonetic inventory. Rosenfelder suggests starting with the basic sounds of a language, thinking about what consonants and vowels you might want to include. What sounds are typical of the world or people you're designing the language for? Are there any sounds that should be avoided for cultural or aesthetic reasons? These questions can guide the initial development of the language. 2. Designing grammar rules. The next step is to decide how words will be formed. Will the language use prefixes and suffixes to express different meanings? Will it have gendered nouns like in French or Spanish, or will it be gender neutral? What about tense or aspect? How will your language convey time? At this stage, Rosenfelder advises creating basic sentences and testing them out to see how they sound and feel. 3. Creating vocabulary. Once the basic structure is in place, Rosenfelder suggests starting to create vocabulary. Think about common words first, such as house, food, and water. Create roots for these words and develop methods for expanding them into related words, e.g., creating different forms of eat, eater, eating. A language as a living, evolving entity. Rosenfelder concludes Part 1 by emphasizing that language construction is not a static process. Just like natural languages, a conlang evolves over time. As creators use and refine their language, they may encounter new challenges and new opportunities for expansion. New sounds, rules, and words may arise organically as the language grows. Rosenfelder encourages readers to think of their languages not as final products, but as living entities that can develop and adapt over time. Part 2. Refining your language. Syntax, morphology, and the expansion of meaning. With Part 1 laying the groundwork for a constructed language, conlang, Part 2 takes us on a journey to refine and expand our creations. Here, Rosenfelder explores the key components that will elevate a language from basic sounds and words to a more complex and expressive system. This part is about building the structure and flexibility of the language, allowing it to function in a variety of real-world scenarios, both fictional and practical. The beauty of Part 2 lies in how Rosenfelder deepens our understanding of linguistic principles while encouraging readers to let their creativity flourish. Refining the grammar, syntax, and sentence structure. At this stage, you have a phonetic inventory and a set of basic words. Your language has sound, meaning, and initial structure, but the real challenge begins when we look at how sentences are formed. Grammar is the system that binds the sounds and meanings together, turning them into coherent thoughts. Rosenfelder provides insights into two major components: syntax, word order, and sentence structure. 1. Word order and sentence construction. Syntax is the arrangement of words to form meaningful sentences. While many natural languages, like English, use the subject-verb-object (SVO) order, there are other possibilities, such as subject-object-verb (SOV), verb-subject-object (VSO), and even object-subject-verb (OSV). Rosenfelder encourages creators to choose a structure that fits the culture or mindset of the speakers. For example, an SVO word order might suit a straightforward, action-oriented people, while an SOV structure could reflect a more philosophical, reflective language. This decision influences how ideas are conveyed and can impart cultural depth to the conlang. 2. Complex sentences and clauses. In many natural languages, simple sentences evolve into complex ones through the use of subordinate clauses and conjunctions. Rosenfelder explores how to build compound sentences, where two or more independent clauses are linked, and complex sentences, where one independent clause is linked to one or more dependent clauses. This helps the language grow beyond basic ideas and allows speakers to express nuanced and sophisticated thoughts. The ways in which your conlang handles questions, negations, and exclamations are also discussed here, offering readers the tools to make their language more dynamic and flexible. Morphology, how words are formed and changed. Next, Rosenfelder dives into morphology, the study of the structure of words. This is where the language begins to feel more alive, as it takes on the ability to convey more meaning through inflections, derivations, and compound words. It's the art of shaping words to represent different tenses, numbers, persons, and so on. 1. Inflection versus derivation. Inflection refers to the modification of a word to convey grammatical information, such as tense or number, while derivation creates new words by adding prefixes or suffixes to existing ones. Rosenfelder explains how different languages handle this process. English uses relatively simple inflections for plurals and tense changes, e.g., walk versus walked, or dog versus dogs. But languages like Latin and Russian have more complex inflection systems, changing the form of nouns, adjectives, and verbs in various ways to express things like case, gender, or aspect. When creating a language, Rosenfelder suggests that creators choose between an isolating language, like Chinese, where words rarely change form, and a glutinative language, like Turkish, where words are modified with multiple affixes, or a more fusional language, like Spanish, where affixes combine multiple grammatical meanings. This choice will determine how rich and complex your language can become. 2. Word formation and compounding. Another fun and often creative aspect of morphology is how words can be formed by combining smaller units of meaning. Rosenfelder walks readers through creating compound words, where two or more root words come together to form a new word. This is common in many languages and can help a conlang expand quickly. For instance, in German, Handschuh means glove. Compound words like these can make your language feel both practical and poetic. 3. Derivational morphology. Derivation allows you to create new words by adding prefixes, suffixes, or even infixes inserted in the middle of a word. Rosenfelder gives examples of how to form different kinds of words, such as making nouns from verbs or adjectives from nouns. For example, if speak is a verb, you might derive a noun like speaker, or a noun describing the act of speaking like speech. The ability to create new words on the fly opens up countless possibilities for a conlang, allowing speakers to express a broad range of ideas with a relatively small core vocabulary. Creating tenses, aspects, and moods. As we build the internal structure of our language, we need to tackle how our conlang will express time, action, and mood. These concepts are crucial for representing ideas with clarity and precision, and Rosenfelder walks us through how to create systems for these elements. 1. Tense. Tense indicates when an action happens, in the past, present, or future. Many languages, including English, use auxiliary verbs to mark tense, e.g., I am walking versus I walked. In conlangs, creators have the freedom to design more nuanced ways of representing time, perhaps using aspects or specific markers for future actions that are uncertain or past actions that have ongoing effects. Tense systems can be as simple or complex as the creator desires, depending on how specific or flexible they want their language to be. 2. Aspect. Aspect refers to how an action is viewed in relation to time. For example, English uses the present continuous, I am walking, to convey an ongoing action, while other languages might have separate words for actions that are completed, repeated, or habitual. Rosenfelder introduces a variety of aspectual distinctions and demonstrates how to create markers for habitual, progressive, or perfective aspects. This section also touches on mood, which expresses the attitude of the speaker toward the action, e.g., indicative, subjunctive, or imperative moods. 3. Voice. In many languages, the voice of a verb indicates whether the subject is performing or receiving the action, active versus passive voice. Rosenfelder guides readers through how to design a system of voice in a conlang, offering examples from natural languages and suggesting ways to incorporate voice into your grammar. Handling number, gender, and case. Languages often have ways of distinguishing between singular and plural, or even dual forms in some languages like Arabic. Gender can add another layer of complexity, with some languages assigning gender to nouns based on masculine, feminine, and sometimes neuter categories, as seen in French or German. Finally, case systems indicate the grammatical function of a noun in a sentence, e.g., subject, object, indirect object. Rosenfelder explores how creators can decide which of these elements are necessary for their language. 1. Number and gender. Rosenfelder explains how number might be marked on nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and how gender, or a lack of it, can reflect cultural perspectives. A language might not have grammatical gender, or it might assign gender to all inanimate objects. For instance, a language spoken by an egalitarian society may decide to make all nouns gender-neutral, or a language with a strong connection to nature might assign gender to plants, animals, and even weather phenomena. 2. Case systems. In languages like Latin, Russian, or Finnish, nouns change form based on their syntactic role, subject, object, etc. Rosenfelder describes how to create a case system in a conlang, detailing how to decide which cases are necessary and how they will interact with the rest of the sentence structure. While some languages have only a handful of cases, others have extensive systems that allow for precise distinctions. The flexibility of meaning. A key takeaway from this section is that language is not static, it's constantly evolving, adapting to new situations, contexts, and meanings. Rosenfelder encourages readers to think of their conlang as a living system that can grow and change, picking up new rules or bending old ones to suit new needs. He suggests regularly revisiting the language, adding new words, testing its structure, and refining it based on how it's being used. Part 3. Elevating your language, stylistic, cultural, and practical considerations. In this final section, Rosenfelder moves from the nuts and bolts of language design to the broader, more abstract aspects of language construction. It's not enough for a language to merely work. It needs to feel alive, adaptable, and capable of conveying rich, nuanced ideas. The central focus here is on how to make your language expressive and flexible, taking it from a constructed system to something that could truly serve as a means of communication for a community or cultural group, whether real or imagined. This part is also where Rosenfelder emphasizes the connection between language and culture, highlighting how the two shape one another. Creating idioms and cultural expressions. One of the most compelling aspects of natural languages is how they capture the cultural essence of a community. Idioms, metaphors, and proverbs are language's way of reflecting the worldview of its speakers. In this section, Rosenfelder delves into how to imbue your conlang with unique expressions that reflect the culture of the people who speak it. 1. Idiomatic expressions. Every language has a set of idioms that don't translate literally but convey deeper meanings rooted in the culture. For instance, in English, we say someone kicked the bucket to mean they died, a phrase with no direct connection to its literal meaning. Rosenfelder discusses how to create idioms that reflect the values, environment, and worldview of your conlang speakers. The idioms you invent could reveal something about the community's relationship with nature, technology, family, or society. If your language is spoken by a seafaring people, perhaps there are idioms related to the ocean, navigating life's difficulties, or weather patterns. 2. Cultural influence on language. Rosenfelder highlights how culture deeply influences language, and how language reflects the way a community interacts with the world around them. A language spoken by a nomadic group might have a wealth of vocabulary for different types of terrain or weather, while a language from a technologically advanced civilization might include terms for concepts that don't exist in our world yet. By shaping your conlang to mirror the culture of its speakers, you can make the language feel more authentic and rooted in its context. Consider how word choices and phrasing in real-world languages are shaped by geography, history, and traditions, and use that to inform your conlang. Literature and poetry in your conlang. Once you've built the fundamental structures of your language, the next step is to create literary styles that can bring it to life in written form. Language is not just about functional communication, it's also about artistry, creativity, and conveying emotions and ideas in compelling ways. 1. Poetry and rhythm. Rosenfelder delves into the ways your language can be used for creative expression through poetry. The rhythm, meter, and sounds of your conlang will affect how poetry feels and what it can convey. Just as English poetry often plays with stress patterns, iambic pentameter, for instance, your language can have its own distinctive rhythmic features that allow for unique poetic structures. Rosenfelder provides guidance on how to develop these features, ensuring your conlang can support expressive forms like poetry, song lyrics, and other creative outlets. 2. Literary genres and styles. A language also needs to support a wide range of literary styles: prose, dialogue, narrative, and so on. Rosenfelder shows how to expand your conlang to encompass these genres. He explores how dialogue in your language might differ from written narrative and how certain words, expressions, and grammar structures may lend themselves better to storytelling than others. If your conlang is meant for a fictional society, its language should have the versatility to convey the full spectrum of human experience, from everyday conversation to high drama. Technology and the future of language. In this section, Rosenfelder addresses the intersection of language and technology, offering a glimpse into how constructed languages might evolve in the future. This is a particularly intriguing aspect of conlang creation because it connects language to modern-day needs and future possibilities. Whether you're designing a language for a science fiction story or preparing your conlang for practical use, it's important to consider how the language might need to adapt to new technologies, scientific discoveries, or evolving communication tools. 1. Text-specific vocabulary. Language evolves to accommodate new concepts and technologies, and so should your conlang. Consider how speakers of your language might adapt their vocabulary to reflect new inventions or discoveries. For example, English speakers coin terms like internet, smartphone, and download to describe concepts that didn't exist a few decades ago. Similarly, your conlang should have the capacity to incorporate such ideas. Rosenfelder provides insights into how you might create tech-related vocabulary and even discuss the creation of new linguistic forms that don't yet exist in natural languages. 2. Writing systems and digital communication. As more languages transition to digital communication, Rosenfelder also touches on how your conlang's writing system might evolve. For example, will it use a traditional alphabet or something more visual, like hieroglyphs or symbols? How will your conlang fare in an era of texting, social media, and emojis? Rosenfelder challenges readers to think about how their conlangs might evolve in the digital age, whether in virtual worlds, social media platforms, or even as part of human-computer interactions. Real-world use. Designing a functional conlang for everyday communication. While many people create conlangs for artistic purposes, Rosenfelder also encourages creators to think about how their language might function in real-world settings. Could it be used for everyday conversation? If so, how would the language evolve to meet the needs of practical communication? 1. Vocabulary for daily life. Rosenfelder discusses how to create a vocabulary that's rich enough to allow for full communication in everyday life. What kinds of words are necessary for a language to cover topics like food, family, and work? He encourages creators to think through the most basic and essential aspects of life and ensure their language has the words to support them. If your conlang is spoken by a community, consider how it will handle social interactions, business dealings, and cultural rituals. The vocabulary must be wide enough to cover diverse experiences, but also flexible enough to adapt over time. 2. Language for a community. One of the most fascinating aspects of conlang creation is the possibility that your language could one day become part of a living, breathing community of speakers. Rosenfelder guides readers through the process of envisioning their conlang being used for more than just personal use, whether in fictional media, role-playing, or even as a living language. This involves practical decisions about the community's interaction with the language, its evolution over time, and how speakers might modify or adapt the language to their needs. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new video updates. Happy learning!